Good morning, everyone. I am Z. Scott, president of Chicago State University. In celebration of Women's History Month, I am delighted to welcome you to today's event and discussion featuring women who teach and featuring some of the most incredible women faculty and administrators of Chicago State University. This event is intended to highlight the careers and professional contributions of women in higher education. I'd like to welcome and thank today's moderator, Chicago State University Student Government Association President Aaliyah Davis. Thank you, Aaliyah, for your commitment and service to our campus community. I'd also like to thank current Chicago State student Christiana Billingsley for her participation in today's event. Finally, I'd like to thank each of you for joining us virtually. The vision behind today's Women's History Month programming is to highlight the incredible accomplishments and contributions of women who are among Chicago State University's faculty and administrators. We want to encourage the next generation of higher education leaders with the understanding that you cannot be what you cannot see. Today, you will hear from amazing, accomplished women, each leaders in their own right and respective fields. I'd like to welcome and thank Dr. Sharice Johnson, Dr. Christine List, Dr. Christy Martis, and Dr. Conchetta Williams for their willingness to share their personal and professional journeys with each of us this morning, and for all that you do to support Chicago State University and our university students. We are so proud of what you've accomplished and are excited for today's discussion. I would like to now turn the program over to Christiana to introduce today's moderator and panelists. Thank you again for joining us here today at Chicago State University.
Thank you, President Scott. Good morning, everyone. My name is Christiana Billingsley. I'm a second-year diverse scholars in education, majoring in elementary education. I'm also a current resident assistant for Chicago State's Residence Hall. Today, I have the honor of presenting today's panel of Chicago State University distinguished faculty members. Each of our panelists represents a different college or department on campus. First, we have faculty panelist Sharice Johnson. Dr. Johnson is the Associate Dean of Student Affairs and Experiential Education and professor in the Department of Pharmacy Practice here at Chicago State University College of Pharmacy. Dr. Johnson received both her Doctor of Pharmacy degree, Master of Science degree in Pharmacy Administration from the University of Illinois at Chicago College of Pharmacy. In February 2018, Dr. Johnson received her teacher certification from the Center for Koru Mindfulness. Subsequently, in August 2020, she became a certified facilitator with the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. Dr. Johnson has served as a board member for both the National Pharmaceutical Association and Chicago Pharmacists Association. Dr. Johnson is a member of Rho Chi Honor Society, Phi Lambda Sigma Leadership Fraternity, and Kappa Psi Pharmaceutical Fraternity. Next is panelist Christine List, who chairs the Department of Communications, Media Arts, and Theater. Dr. List received her PhD in radio, TV, film from Northwestern University and is the author of 2 published books and numerous academic journal articles on the topic of race and ethnicity in media. Dr. List is also an award-winning filmmaker and screenwriter who teaches film production and screenwriting here at CSU. Her film projects often center around social justice issues, like her documentary Don't Tempt Us, which follows the students' movement for social change during Guatemala's Dirty War. Her passion projects have allowed her to work with major film actors, including Iman Walker from Chicago Fire, Edward James Olmos from Narcos, and Stand and Deliver. Dr. List has directed films in the U.S., South America, Europe, and Africa. Dr. List is currently working with her digital cinema students to finish their most recent student-run movie project. It's a film called Contentment, which will premiere on May 4th in Breaky Theater. Following Dr. List, we have faculty panelist Dr. Christy Martis from the College of Arts and Science. Dr. Christy Martis received her bachelor's degree from Augustana College, majoring in chemistry and mathematics, and her PhD in theoretical chemistry from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She completed a postdoctoral fellowship at the National Institutes of Standards and Technology using computational techniques to study HIV protease inhibitor binding. She joined the faculty at Chicago State in 2004 and has taught a variety of chemistry and physical science courses at Chicago State and is active in the POGIL teaching community. Her current research involves computational modeling of hydrogen catalysts using density functional theory and has ongoing collaborations with scientists at Argonne National Laboratory. Our final panelist is Concetta A. Williams, a published author. Dr. Williams is an assistant professor of English here at Chicago State University. She teaches courses in the secondary English education program as well as writing courses. Her research focuses on using literature to examine the experiences of urban youth, broadening the definition of literacy in an effort to better identify and understand perceptions of literature behavior in academic settings, and working with diverse student populations, which includes the first year, first generation students. I will now turn the program over to our moderator, Aaliyah Davis.
Thank you, Christiana. Good morning. My name is Aaliyah Davis, a graduating senior majoring in occupational therapy. I am proud to serve as the 2022-2023 Student Government Association President, the historian for the National Council of Negro Women, the social media chairwoman for the Student Occupational Therapy Association, and a student ambassador here at Chicago State University. It is my honor and privilege to bring on our panelists today and to begin with our questioning. To our viewers, feel free to enter any questions you have to our panelists in the comment section of the platform you are watching us on. We'll get to your audience questions later in the program. To begin, let's start with Dr. Martis. Why did you pursue a career in teaching?
Well, I will admit that I did not plan to become a teacher. My mom was a grade school teacher and eventually a reading teacher at a community college. And so I grew up knowing how much work it is to be a teacher in higher ed. And so I went to graduate school hoping to go to into industry. And I trained for that. And that's my postdoc was designed for a kind of a pharmaceutical position. But they say, life's what's happening when you're making other plans. And I met my husband in graduate school. And while he's not in academia, he does have a set of kind of specialized skills. So then we started looking for places where we could both live in the same time zone. And Chicago is very good for that, in that we could both work. And there's not a lot of pharmaceutical companies in Chicago. So I looked around and ended up in higher ed. I will say that it, in retrospect, has been kind of the perfect career for me, so I don't have any regrets, but I didn't plan it.
Thank you for that, Dr. Martis. Thank you for that great story. Dr. Williams, could you tell us what led you to join Chicago State University as a faculty member?
Absolutely. I have a very interesting interaction with CSU. I'm also a CSU alum, and it was at that time the desire to have the Black college experience while still being able to stay close to home that I was first introduced to CSU's mission, which is the commitment to serving populations that have been traditionally underserved. And so it was that introduction and that during that time, the commitment was fostered within me that led me back to CSU as a faculty member.
Thank you for that response, Dr. Williams. Let's hear from Dr. Johnson now in answering the same question. Tell us what led you to join CSU as a faculty member.
So first, I want to just start off by thanking President Scott, the University Foundation, Christiana, Aaliyah, student leaders of our university for really being intentional about having this conversation, exploring opportunities in higher education for individuals and particularly women. So I have to be honest. Similarly, I never really saw a path for myself in higher education. And in hindsight, it's probably odd because as a pharmacist, that's exactly what we do. We educate patients on how to take their medication safely. We also serve as the medication experts on the healthcare team. So, in the college's infancy, Miriam Mobley Smith, who was one of the founding administrators, had been a faculty member of mine while I was in pharmacy school, who I absolutely adored. She also became a friend, a mentor, and she saw something in me that I probably didn't see in myself. And she really brought me into the fold for me to become a member of the founding faculty and administrative team. So 16 years later into my tenure here at the university, I absolutely can say without a shadow of a doubt, I love my job. I love this institution, and I'm excited about where we're going.
Thank you for that, Dr. Johnson, that excellent response. We haven't heard from Dr. Liss yet. What do you like about working in higher education, Dr. Liss?
Well, I really love Chicago State University, and it's representative of pretty much any university situation that you would be in if you decided to go for a tenure track position. And basically, what's great about working in a university is that you're surrounded by people who are intellectuals, philosophers, historians, scientists, artists, film directors. And so if you have a proclivity to think or be creative, or you just really enjoy researching, going into university teaching and research is a great way to go, because we get rewarded for doing these things. So I highly recommend, if you really like the arts, if you enjoy research, go into a university career.
Thank you for that, Dr. Liss. I want to switch back over to Dr. Martis. There are a lot of great things happening in STEM right now, or should I say STEAM? Could you also share, what do you like about working in higher education?
Well, I certainly appreciate my colleagues here. It's a great, the chemistry and physics department has been a great department to work with. And what I also appreciate, I think, about higher ed in general is the independence it gives you. I can decide what sort of research I want to work on. I can decide, I really like making up new activities for my classroom. So I can decide how to teach a particular topic. And I like that freedom and that independence. And that's always been a big draw to me. And I really like knowing that I'm helping people achieve whatever their goals are. So there's a sense of personal satisfaction working here that is unique, I think, in higher ed.
Thank you for that, Dr. Martis. With that, I would like to go to Dr. Liss and Dr. Johnson. How has Chicago State University supported you in your career? We can start with Dr. Liss first.
Okay, thanks, Aaliyah. When I first started here many years ago, one of the first interactions I had was with a colleague, and we were part of the English department at that time. And my colleague was Dr. Haki Madhubuti, and he's a world famous celebrated poet. And he came up to me and gave me one of his books. And he just welcomed me into the department and shared what he was doing with me. And I think that's kind of representative of a lot of people here at Chicago State. I have colleagues that I interact with, and I've been able to work on projects collectively with the African American Studies Department. We had a scholar here named Lily Golden, and she was a Black Russian woman, and her area of expertise was Alexander Pushkin, and she led me to film a documentary about Pushkin. And the students are also equally interesting and willing to collaborate. So I've met so many great students, and been able to work with them on projects, and I just think that Chicago State is a welcoming institution, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Liss. Dr. Johnson, could you also respond with how CSU has supported you in your career?
Sure. So if I start on surface, CSU has been a wonderful place for me to sharpen my teaching skills, grow as a leader with increasing administrative responsibility, and also be able to explore my passions. And in the intro, you heard about my mindfulness certification. And then also, I have a passion for bringing emotional intelligence into the classroom. But as I thought about this question when we were preparing for this panel discussion, more deeply than that, I think that when I look at my values as a human being on this earth, and I look at the inherent values of the institution, they totally match. So those values include having a higher purpose, I should say, having meaning about what I do and how I show up, also being connected, being engaged, being present. And so through the up and downs with, my role with the institution, when you're rooted in those values and those values align with where you at, it makes it easy to be rooted in what you're doing and how you're showing up. So I've been able, and I've been blessed, I should say, to work with faculty, amazing administrators and students. And so I really feel that when it's all said and done, everybody here at Chicago State is rowing in the same direction. And who wouldn't want to be a part of that? So Chicago State, I consider it my home. I haven't left. I've been here 16 years. And again, I'm excited about what we're doing and where we're going.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Dr. Martis, as a woman in higher education, how have you balanced your home life with your career?
Well, I kind of feel like you maybe should ask my husband and kids this question, but I'll note a couple of things. In preparing for this, I looked up for some statistics, and between 20% to 34% of higher ed professionals are female, depending on whether you're physical science, that's the 20%, and about 34% if you're in life sciences. It's different for other fields, but I don't think it's parity anywhere. And partly it is because it's hard to manage the demands of higher ed. It's hard to manage the demands of any job and parenthood, whether you're a male or female. I had a toddler when I started at Chicago State, and I had my second child about 3 years later. The department has been very, very helpful. Dr. Van Dusen and I have occasionally swapped classes, so either of us could go run to pediatricians. And I think that many of my students have seen my kids when they were younger, especially in the middle school, when they're too sick to go to school, but not quite ready to stay home all by themselves in the back of the classroom. I have, crayons and toys in the classroom. So some of that is just managing. Some of it is good childcare. I was lucky that my husband and I could, for much of my time, pay somebody to watch our kids when we were at work. I will say that I did do most of my grading during kids' basketball, volleyball, and band performances, to the point where I'm pretty sure I didn't ever watch any of their games. So I don't know whether that's balance or not, but I was there. Crock pot, slow cooker was your best friend, right? Toss the food in the morning and have something to eat at the end of the day. I think anybody that tells you that they're balancing it is probably not. I think it's more of a seesaw, right? So sometimes you're doing one, and that's what you're doing. You're doing the kid thing, and sometimes you're doing the other, and you're doing the work, and you just hop back and forth a lot. So I won't say it's easy, but it's certainly not impossible. Lean on people that you can lean on, and my kids, seem to have turned out okay. They're getting ready to go to college, and one's in college, and they got really good at grading multiple choice, so you can use these kids.
Thank you for that, Dr. Martis. That was such a great answer. And I would like to open it up to the rest of our panelists. How has the balance of your home life with your career been for you? If any of our panelists would like to answer that question.
I'll go ahead and start. Similar to some of the other panelists, I have two children, two boys. And my first son, when I started here, he had just turned 1, I think, and now he is 17. And then my youngest, he is 13, and I, was pregnant with him while I was here and had him. So, CSU has been a family affair. I think it's all about prioritizing and being intentional about what needs to be done. And so, knowing that we serve in multiple roles as mothers, as spouses, as sisters and friends, and then also as administrators and faculty members here, it's prioritizing. So my things to do list, my calendar, I have everything blended. I consider this one life, and I think that's the beauty of working in academia, as I can put my dental appointments on my calendar when the boys have football games, and it really becomes one life and very integrated. So again, I really appreciate being able to kind of bring my full self to work and talk to my colleagues about the ups and downs of parenthood and the joys as well. So, like I said, CSU has been a family affair for me.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I would like to go on to Dr. Liss. What has been your most proud moment in your career so far as a woman and as a professional in your area?
I'd have to say that one of my proudest moments happened last year when I got to meet with the new president of Cinespace Studios. Cinespace is the second largest film studio in the United States, and it's headquartered right here in Chicago. And Chicago's film industry is really growing right now. And the new president is a woman. And so it was really nice to see that my industry, the film industry, and my industry is also education, higher education, that there are female leaders in these industries now. And I've had the privilege of working with administrators who are Black women for my entire career. Most of the people that supervise me and that I work with at this institution have been Black women, and that's been really refreshing to work in that environment. And so going back to Cinespace, so when I was there at Cinespace Studios meeting with the new president, who's a woman now, I also brought a new faculty member. And this new faculty member, Professor Dow, was my student about 20 years ago. And he went on to get his MFA at USC, the Harvard Film Schools, as Shonda Rhimes says, and worked in LA. And I was able to lure him back into our department. So here I was sitting with one of my students who had become very accomplished, and with a woman who was running a movie studio in Chicago. And I'm working at a university with a Black woman, female president. And it just felt like things were really going well. I was happy that day.
Thank you, Dr. Liss. That was a great story. I would like to transition over to Dr. Johnson and Dr. Williams. Did the COVID-19 pandemic change the way you see your work as a faculty member? We can start with Dr. Williams first.
It absolutely did. I think we have always saw our work as faculty members as being threefold, fourfold. We're classroom, we're teaching, we are often providing a variety of supporting our students in a variety of ways. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, we got a chance to really interact with our students in ways that we probably hadn't before. And it opened up a space for us to continue to do that. So sometimes we are now able to interact with our students virtually during office hours at times when students are saying, I'm not going to be able to make it on campus, but I need the extra support. And so I'm able to say, okay, can we jump on Zoom at 5 o'clock after you get off of work? And so it allowed us to see opportunities to be more available to students and to provide them with support. So it definitely helped us kind of expand the ways that we can support our students. And I don't know if we would have been as either open to or aware of had we have not been kind of pushed into that virtual space during the pandemic. And so I definitely think it's changed the way that we see ourselves. It's just expanded the way that we can support our students and see ourselves as additional support systems for our students.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Dr. Johnson, could you also explain how the pandemic has changed the way you see your work as a faculty member?
Sure. I would say broadly, it really shifted my perspective. One, it magnified and it amplified for me more than ever in my entire career the criticality of pharmacists and healthcare, and more so public health practice. So, pharmacists testing, screening, administering vaccines, and now prescribing medication to mitigate COVID infection. I mean, we have been accessible healthcare providers and probably the most accessible healthcare providers. I also personally witnessed College of Pharmacy practicing faculty frontlining during the pandemic, as well as students and alums. And it really underscored the importance of our academy and the College of Pharmacy in contributing to this workforce. And then we all know, unfortunately, that communities of color have really bared a tremendous burden of being adversely affected by the pandemic. And when I think about or I should say the pillars on which the College of Pharmacy was founded, our goal is really to educate individuals from these communities so that these now pharmacists can go back into these communities and improve the greater health. So ultimately, it just really underscored for me without a shadow of a doubt that we are on purpose. We are doing the good work, and I'm incredibly proud to be a part of that.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I would like to open up this question to all of our panelists who feel comfortable. You all have accomplished so much with your successful academic careers. What is your current goal or dream you have yet to fulfill?
I'll go. Thanks, Aaliyah. So Chicago State University just received a $1.6 million community grant from Bobby Rush as one of his last efforts in the Congress before retiring. And so my goal is really to make our academic department the best media training department in the Midwest. And I think we really have, with this equipment money, I think we really have the ability to do that. We've developed so many relationships with the help of the provost and the president. And we've got partnerships with Cinestate Studios, with Leo Burnett, advertising agency. They just set up a $25,000 fund to give students scholarships, and they run a advertising boot camp with us. And we're talking to people at Regal Mile Studio about partnering with them. So I really have the goal of making Chicago State the best film school in the Midwest. And I think it's really possible. And our students are really creative, brilliant, hardworking. They've made so many successes in the film industry, and our faculty are very strong, and we've got the support. So that's my goal.
Thank you, Dr. Liz. Dr. Martis, would you also share what your current goal or dream you have yet to fulfill in your career?
Well, Well, I will say that a few years ago I would have said that I was hoping that one of my students would have finished their PhD, but that's happened. I've had a student finish their PhD and is now working with their PhD, and a couple more in the pipeline. But that's not to say that I'm not proud of all the ones who found jobs right out of college, because I am. I think what I'm proudest of is not necessarily a future goal, but of how many of our students take what they learn and get really exciting, cool jobs. And one of the best parts about my job now is I know enough people working in the Chicago area that I can take students. We went out to Ingredion, and we took students and we met with some alumni there. And we're going to go talk to some other food chemistry companies in April. And we now have alumni at all kinds of companies that I know, and that I can then hit up and say, hey, can you come tell our students, kind of your story about what you were then and what you are now, and how it was worth it, even though quantum was really hard. So I think that's one of the great joys of being kind of at this point in my career, is that I'm getting to see some of the payoffs, and that's a very fulfilling part at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Martis. Dr. Williams, would you also like to share a current goal or dream that you have yet to fulfill?
Sure. I would say to make sure that and to reestablish and reaffirm CSU as the place that really informs larger policies around how we serve, particularly our P through 12 students better. Definitely a dream would be to really get in there and impact some policy around education. I know our colleagues in the social work department are establishing a policy institute, so I've been working and collaborating with them on ways that our programs can talk to each other and help to really get into the larger discussions about how we can just really be a force in different aspects and of education reform and policy making. So that would be something that I would say would be a goal or something still hanging out there in my career. So I'm kind of excited about that work. I think I like Dr. Johnson has said, I'm really excited about where the university is going and the path that it's on. And so I think we're heading in a good direction. And so I'm kind of excited to be a part of that and really get in there and be a part of some of those larger discussions. So I would probably say that's something that is a goal of mine.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Dr. Johnson, would you also like to share a current goal or dream you have for your career?
Sure. So I really appreciate that question, Aaliyah. So you may not know that of all practicing pharmacists in the United States, 5% of them are actually Black African American. So I think there's a lot of work that we need to do as a college, as an academy, to get communities of color really excited about pharmacy. I think about how I got introduced to pharmacy. I was in high school. I did pretty good in math and science. And, I went to talk to my guidance counselor because at that time I had decided I was going to be an EMS technician, a paramedic. And so he talked to me and he said, Cherise, you know what? You do very good in your science and math courses. I really think you should go to medical school. And I thought about it and I'm like, I don't really want to see blood. I don't want to have to touch people. So he said, okay, why don't you become a pharmacist? And I said, okay. And then that's what I did. And so I think there's a lot of work for us to do to get our middle schoolers, our high schoolers really excited about pharmacy. And I'll say this for Dean Fate, I want like students busting down our doors to get in the College of Pharmacy. I want to outgrow this college so we have a multitude of students ready to enter the profession, because honestly, there is a great need. So if I had to kind of dream big, that would be my dream.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. This will be our final question. So for everyone watching, please enter your questions in the comment section of the platform you are watching us on, and I will try my best to get to everyone's questions at the end. In the meantime, for our panelists, what advice would you give women today who are interested in pursuing a teaching career in higher education? We can begin with Dr. Williams first.
I would say stay focused. We are definitely carving out a space for women in higher ed, and being able to not fear some of those larger decisions around starting a family or choosing a career path. I would say, so stay focused, have an agenda, and create a path and stay on that path, but also at the same time being flexible. Some of us wouldn't be here if we hadn't have been flexible. So really thinking about where you want to see yourself, and just getting on that path.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Could you also share, Dr. Martis, your advice you would give a woman today who is interested in pursuing a teaching career in higher education?
Yes, I think one thing. So if you're going to go into a teaching career, you're going to go into higher ed, you're going to need to go to graduate school. And I know that can sound daunting at the beginning, because you're like, I'm just trying to get through college, and you want me to go for 5 more years. I will say that I really enjoyed graduate school. You don't have a lot of money, but and you don't have a lot of time, but you're doing something really cool, and the research is great. But I think also when you're in graduate school, there's kind of sometimes a kind of a false, you can either go into industry, or you can go be a professor like your professors in graduate school, but that's a relatively small number of institutions. And so if you think you might want to go into higher ed, remember that, in Chicago alone, I think there's 64, 65 schools of higher ed in Chicago alone, and they're all different. And they all have different needs and different requirements and different work-life balances. And you can find one that works for you if you look a little. So don't feel like, oh, I don't want to be the professor. The professors I have in my graduate school. That's fine. You might want to be them, but you don't have to be. And you can still be in higher ed, depending on what you want out of your career.
Thank you, Dr. Martis. Dr. Liz, would you also like to give your remarks?
Yeah, thanks. I would say for women thinking of going into higher ed teaching, to always also remember that if you're on a tenure track, that you're also being paid to do research or creative work. So you need to really enjoy that. And I know all of us in higher ed do. And what's cool about it is you get paid to do it. That's part of your job responsibilities. So when we're not in the classroom teaching, we're doing research or creating, and we're getting paid to do that and evaluated on that. So if that's what you like to do and you feel fulfilled by, higher education is a really great place to be.
Thank you, Dr. Liz. Finally, we'll have Dr. Johnson. What advice would you give?
Yeah, so I agree with all the sentiments that have been shared. I would also add and say that you should get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I have been challenged in a good way. But I think it's a good sign when you feel uncomfortable. That means that you're stretching yourself, you're growing, you are really honing skills. So I would say get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I know the title of this panel discussion is Women Who Teach in Higher Education, but I would assume most of the panelists, the distinguished panelists, and I can certainly speak for myself, we also have been women who have cried, women who have been scared, women who have persevered, women who have been disappointed, and yet, we stand. We're steadfast about what we want to do and how we want to show up. And dare I use the women who have the F word, I should say, women who have failed or who have experienced failure. But as we all know, that's a necessary ingredient for success. So be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself, and just know that that's part of the journey on becoming a faculty member in higher education.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I would like to thank all of the panelists today. I appreciate the advice that you have given us and the viewers. I particularly appreciate it because I have thought about a career in higher education once I received my master's degree. So being able to moderate this event with such distinguished women in your career and hear how you have come from your beginnings to now is amazing and thoughtful to be in this presence with you. And I hope our viewers have felt that as well. Speaking of our viewers, we have a few questions from them, so we can go ahead and get into that. I'll ask you guys these questions, and then our panelists, if you feel comfortable, you can answer. The first question is, are there any unique challenges women face in your particular career field? Dr. Liz?
Yeah, hi, Aaliyah. Well, since my field is higher education, but it's also film production. And so the industry keeps statistics on the rate of women and people of color entering the field. And women are still way behind in terms of how many of us are directors, producers, cinematographers, editors, and the same goes for people of color. So that's still a challenge. It's getting better, but it's still a challenge. In academia, really, when I came for my first interview for my first tenure track job, which was Chicago State, I had just found out I was pregnant, and I was afraid to reveal that during the interview because back then, I mean, if you were pregnant, a lot of times you wouldn't be hired, and the hiring committee was all men. And so we've come a long way from that. In academia, I think women in the arts anyway have really reached parity with men, and as far as the numbers go. And so it's a much more equal playing field in higher ed for women in the arts and the humanities.
I would agree. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Dr. Williams.
No, I would say I would agree. I think in the humanities, women have definitely found themselves carving out a space. But I would say that sometimes uniquely we find ourselves in teaching spaces and still trying to etch out a niche for women in the research spaces can still be a little challenging. So I would say that is a unique challenge for the woman who is interested in focusing on research and finding a way in that space.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
I think that what is sometimes an issue for women in STEM is the and it's probably much worse for people of color in general, the desire in terms of committee work to have, a woman on every committee or a person of color on every committee. And if you only have 20% of your faculty being women, and probably less than that, 6% in higher ed and STEM, people of color, those people run from committee to committee, and then people wonder, well, why aren't you getting any research done? Well, I don't know, because I've been in a meeting for. So I think that's a real, and I see that even at the, I'm involved with some groups who do mentoring of graduate students, and I see the females volunteering to be mentors at a higher rate than the men volunteering to be mentors. And they're like, well, because I know they need mentors. Well, yes, but you also need to finish your PhD. And so the pull on your time is I think different for women than for men often.
Thank you, Dr. Martis. Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, I think pharmacy has been a little bit different, I would say. In the distant past, the dynamic, was that pharmacy was a male dominated profession. Now, currently, it's female dominated. And I think that's been principally because there's been a lot of flexibility in how pharmacists can work. So you can work part time. There are positions that are available around the clock. So for a woman who has a family, there's a lot of opportunity in pharmacy. But I think what has been a public health concern, shall I say, is the burnout and the exhaustion that pharmacists have been having. And this was issue prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has just really blown it out the water. And I think I would assume, and this probably has been documented in the literature, is that with stress and burnout, women are more adversely affected. So, although across the board, pharmacists, regardless of your demographic, we're getting burned out. But when you look at women and how it's affected them, because like we've talked about, women are probably juggling family responsibilities, taking care of parents, and so on and so forth, it tends to impact women more greatly. So it's an interesting dynamic. So I would say that's probably the challenge for women right now in pharmacy, is really being carrying the burden, I should say, of burnout.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
I
ahead,
wanted
Dr.
to add one other thing. Oh, sorry, Aaliyah. I just wanted to add one other thing, is that the job market too is a national job market. So a lot of people have to move from their hometown to get a tenure track job. And then if you start a family away from your family, then you're stuck with basically no support system. So that does make it tough for women.
Thank you, Dr. Liss. Another question that we have from the audience: how can the industry of higher education do better by women and by women of color specifically? And what systematic changes might help these issues?
Well, I would say, first of all, funding. I think it would really help women of color to be fully funded in their doctoral programs. So, and also, I don't know if the audience knows, but usually if you're accepted into a PhD program, you usually get some sort of funding. But the funding can range from minimal to full funding, and full funding would include covering all of your costs for education, but then also giving you a stipend to live off of while you're studying. So that type of funding package would really help bring more women of color into our fold.
Thank you.
I would say also doing a better job of valuing women's interests and providing the space for women to really grow. I think that could be a major change, particularly for women of color. When women of color, or just people in color in general, seek to research, or embark on research that focuses on those particular populations, I think we could see a systematic change as really supporting that and valuing that as viable research. So I think that's something that would attract more folks to higher education and into different disciplines.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I also don't think the audience realizes that when you do your dissertation, you have to have a dissertation committee. So basically you have 3 mentors helping you through the process of writing your dissertation and doing your research. And yeah, and a lot of times women and people of color cannot find a dissertation committee that might be interested or knowledgeable on their research areas, especially in the humanities. Yeah, like for example, in Black film history, there are very few PhDs in that area, and the material's still being sought after and put into archives. So there's a great need for Black film scholars out there right now, and very few people qualified to mentor them.
Yeah, and Dr. List brings up a good point. So I've been primarily speaking through the lens of pharmacy, and I could probably speak through a lens more broadly as it relates to healthcare. I mentioned before that there's a minority of Black pharmacists in the total pharmacist population, and that's probably true with other healthcare professions. So for me, I've been very fortunate. When you look at the numbers of faculty who are from communities of color in health professions education, probably even smaller than what I talked about before. So, I think about my own experience. I've been very fortunate from day one throughout my entire career that I've had people across the continuum who have poured into me, who have served as mentors. So the current dean of the College of Pharmacy, he is a mentor of mine. I could be vulnerable with him. It goes beyond a working relationship. So I think the work that can be done includes making sure that people who are at the top across the board are kind of pulling those of us who want to have higher trajectories into the fold, so to speak. And so seeing dynamic women like President Scott, Provost Roundtree, that also is I think important to have and to see and to be a part of. So I would say mentorship, whether it's formal, informal, is an important piece of making sure that we can bring more women and especially women of color into higher education.
Thank you, everyone. For our final question, all of you all have spoken about research and graduate studies. Are there any opportunities for graduate coursework here at Chicago State University for your specific fields?
Well, I can say no. Chemistry at Chicago State is a bachelor's only program, as is physics. Biology has a master's program, but we do have a number of kind of collaboration programs running through CSER, so you can do a year kind of as a post-bac on your way to a PhD. So you should definitely check in with the CSER office if you're interested in that.
We have a course in communications, media arts, and theater, couple of graduate screenwriting and television writing courses that we teach in collaboration with Conchetta's department in English, because the English has an MFA in creative writing. So we partner with them for those courses, but we don't have a graduate program in media arts.
So we do. We have the MFA and we have the MA, and then we partner with the College of Education for the MAT, which is the Masters of Art in Teaching. So we are very much able to provide those pipeline programs from undergraduate through the master's program and then on to the PhD or EDD. So we actually have those opportunities to put students on that path.
Yeah, and for pharmacy, the entry level degree is the Doctor of Pharmacy degree, which we offer here. I think what you're seeing in healthcare, what's becoming more commonplace is that healthcare professionals do go for a master's degree, so a combined a health professions degree, maybe combined with an MBA, which we do offer here at Chicago State, maybe a PharmD and a combined Master of Public Health, which we do offer here at Chicago State. So within the College of Pharmacy, I would say no, or maybe not yet. I know that's something that we want to do, is to offer graduate level programs in the future. But right now, there is opportunity to, again, have those other opportunities for advanced degrees here at Chicago State.
Thank you, everyone. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I hope our viewers have as well. I wish we had more time, because this is definitely a conversation that could carry over for more than just the hour that we have with them today. With that, it is time to wrap up today's conversation. If you all would please join me in welcoming Chicago State's Foundation's Executive Director, Miss Melanie Silas.
Thank you, CSU faculty, for joining us. And thank you, the viewers, for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed today's session. The mission of Chicago State Foundation is to advance the interest and welfare of CSU by building relationships, securing philanthropic support, stewarding assets, and otherwise procuring private support on behalf of the university. Working in concert with the President Z. Scott of CSU, Chicago State Foundation helps to identify strategic priorities, raise public awareness for the university, and secure private support to create new opportunities for students. Please consider supporting these efforts by making a gift to current CSU students by visiting csu.edu/donate today. Thank you for considering it, and I look forward to more events like this and in person.